the second installment of our NERC 101 webinar series. We started this series earlier this year to really get and gain a familiarity with NERC, as NERC is looking to expand some of its jurisdiction and some of its compliance requirements, now potentially being extended to end users. As large users, which ELCON members and also ECA members who are also joining us today, are generally large loads, whether they be manufacturers, industrial processing, data centers, hyperscalers. So this is an area that NERC has been doing a significant amount of work in. And a lot of us as end users have not had the familiarity with NERC and what its purpose and how it is organized and what its internal processes are. And so really wanted to provide an opportunity where we introduce NERC to the end users, the large end users, and have the ability to really understand what their purpose is, how we can engage meaningfully with them as we all become more and more important to the reliability of the grid. So we're very pleased to have this second installment where we're going to look more at the registration process, the standards development process, where we identify if there is an issue, a risk to the bulk power system, how do we identify that risk and build a compliance mechanism around that. So we'll hear in depth from NERC staff. Really encourage people to raise your hands should you have questions. Speakers may call on people as they're speaking, or they can wait till the end, but we do have a few minutes towards the end for questions. So feel free to either raise your hand or put your question in the chat, and I'll be sure to ask those questions of our speakers at the end. So with that, I'm not sure, Jeff Dennis, just wanted to see our Executive Director of the Electricity Customer Alliance, if you just had any initial thoughts to share, more with the data center perspective, perhaps. I'll go ahead and introduce Jeff Dennis, Executive Director to the Electricity Customer Alliance, who is also jointly hosting this webinar for us. So Jeff, any comments?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Thanks for the opportunity. I apologize for not being on camera, but I will be shortly for the Q&A. But no, let me start by thanking ELCON organizationally and you personally, Karen, for your leadership on these issues and making sure that customers from across all the various segments are engaged in these issues. I really want to echo what you said about the importance of this moment and the importance of learning more about NERC, about its mandatory standards regime, about the process of developing standards and registering entities, all of these things that we're learning about in this series. As you mentioned, we are in a moment where we're looking at lots of new different kinds of loads and the impact they may have on the system, and NERC is in the process of taking comment on bringing end use customers into that registration framework, which would be unprecedented. It would be the first time we've done that, and so it definitely requires good customer engagement. And so I really want to commend NERC as well for all of the steps they've taken to engage with customers over the last couple of years, their willingness to do these webinars as well. And so with that, I'll turn it back so we can get to the content, but definitely glad to hear folks here. Looking forward to the conversation, particularly on registration and what that means as we're thinking carefully about that as an industry right now. So with that, I'll turn it back, but thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. And just wanted to also introduce Venona Grief, who we'll hear from a little bit later. She is our absolute NERC guru. She has been involved in NERC proceedings on behalf of large loads for a very long time. Even though we weren't the center of the universe as we are now, she has been in the process, and we're going to hear a little bit later from her on some of the actual experiences of interacting with NERC. But let's get to the crux of what everybody's here today to learn a little bit more. Zach, I don't know, do you want me to just go ahead and turn it right over to Jim to start talking about registration, or did you have any initial thoughts that you wanted to start with?
Yeah, let me just share the slides quickly here, and we can just quickly reference. First of all, can everyone see the slides?
Yep, we can see them. Great. Thank you,
Great,
Zach.
great. Yeah, well, we have a wonderful lineup of NERC staff, directors from all these the various departments to speak to their specific issue areas. So we'll hear from registration, reliability standards, and compliance. And as Karen mentioned, we will have a Q&A at the end, but feel free as things go forward, raise your hand, include questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them too as we go along here. But yeah, with that, we'll turn over to Jim Stewart to talk a little bit about registration.
All right, let me make sure that you can hear me okay. Kind of thumbs up.
We can hear you,
that's
Jim.
great.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm the director of registration at NERC, and we've got 6 regional partners that we work closely with, the regions that do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to registration. But we have one program. There is one registration program, not 7 registration programs. And so to start with, as I talk just through these slides, or this first set, the first slide, those various topics are just overarching how registration works and kind of what its function is. I was thinking about how I might respond to why do we have registration. And the 2003 blackout, I think, was a wake-up call for the entire country. It wasn't very long after the events in New York City and Washington, and realized that power system was incredibly important, and we can't leave it to chance. I think entities that have been responsible for this have done a great job, but there comes a certain point when it really needs to be mandatory that people are doing what they ought to be doing, and the registration process is no more or less than identifying those entities that are impacting reliability of the bulk power system. Whatever function they are performing, there's criteria that describe that function, those particular functions, and then they're placed on a registry. And once that just so you understand how that process works, it's not give and take. It's very much a request for technical information, engagement with entities that may be candidates for registration. So there's a lot of engagement, primarily between the regional entities and those entities, to compare their characteristics, their operating characteristics, what their responsibilities are with those functions that are identified in the NERC rules of procedure. And I probably don't need to, probably all know this, but the NERC rules of procedure are approved by FERC. And so until these various things that we do are proposed and approved by FERC, they are not enforced in the lower 48. So as I said, we identify those entities that perform reliability function. Then that evaluation goes forward, and then there's a formal notification, an email notification that is sent to the entity. We identify a compliance point of contact as well as an executive point of contact and others. And then that formal notification goes to the entity through that designated individual and notifies them of their placement on the registry. And at that point in time, then the entity is responsible for those mandatory standards that apply to it. So that why is it's vital that we have those folks that are performing those reliability functions are doing that with reliability in mind, and they're doing that alongside or in harmony with the requirements that are in the reliability standards. So the rules of procedure say owner, operators, and users of the bulk power system. We've talked a little bit about, or heard it said today, that it's an unusual step that NERC is taking to identify users, essentially, of the bulk power system. And we'll talk a little bit about, I think, the topic that most folks are really interested in, and that's these large loads, a specific subset of large loads. And also, I guess I just want to mention that as we as the registration process takes place, an entity may meet certain criteria, the criteria for registration. And I want to be clear that there is a formal exception process that's described in the NERC rules of procedure. It's not a minor thing, and we treat all of those requests seriously. They're going to be evaluated very carefully. So when I'm repeating myself, and part of that's intentional. When is an entity expected to be in compliance with reliability standard? They're expected to be in compliance once they receive that formal notification that I mentioned right at the very first. Also, with an eye toward the future, with the large loads or computational load entities, that's the term that we're using for these large computational loads. When would that take place? It'll be out there in the future somewhere. We'll develop the criteria. We're going to talk a bit about that. And once that's approved by the NERC Board of Trustees, then that goes to FERC for approval. And it will not be in effect until FERC has approved that. And then would go through the process of registering entities. So how is the work actually done? It's done with engagement. How's registration work done? It's done with engagement by the regional entities in direct contact with those companies that may be candidates for registration. Zach, if you would move forward. All right. So you might say, what's in it for me? That's what we all want to know, is what's in it for me. So for a registered entity, for an entity that will be registered, really a clear definition or description of responsibility. An accurate representation. You know that your peers or your fellow industry participants are being expected the very same thing. It's going to be consistent. Also, we're just coming off of a really concerted effort to register IBR resources, in particular, much smaller IBR resources than we ever have previously up until just recently. And I think one of the things that I've discovered through this process is that many of them, I don't think, realized how it's not just put a facility in place and be paid for the energy that they produce. It's also, there's a really big reliability responsibility that comes with that as you connect to the bulk power system and either take energy or add energy to that system, or dependent on that energy. You're part of a very large machine. It's been described as the U.S. electric power grid is the world's largest machine, and you're part of that as you start to take on that role. Also, because you're a registered entity, you will be well informed of alerts and developing concerns that may affect you as an operating entity. For the bulk power system and also for NERC, the benefit is really to ensure, encourage, promote reliability. We through compliance, we have a good understanding about how entities are doing. It may be that some of our standards aren't exactly right, and we get visibility through that through the compliance monitoring processes. I won't try to take Lonnie's thunder or Jamie's thunder, but that feedback of compliance to standards and also to compliance is vital as we go through the compliance process. Increased data access so that we have a good understanding, better understanding overall of how the system is working. And also there's a real sense of collaboration. There are industry committees that advise the NERC board of trustees on various matters, and NERC staff are involved with those. Those are not NERC committees. They're committees that are made up of industry, but we benefit by that relationship that we have with them and being able to listen carefully. The next slide, Zach, if you would. So now I'm going to focus really just on the subset of large loads that probably most of you are interested in. We're seeking to create a an entity. Right now, the name is computational load entity. NERC loves its acronyms, or CLE. So that's something that you'll hear tossed about, and it just doesn't roll off the tongue very well. But that's where we are right now. So our effort is to really work with industry to really to define what that criteria ought to be. We have a draft, and we're going to talk about that, the specifics of that draft for registration criteria, but we really need feedback from people who are in this business, and also those of you who may not be in the computational load candidacy. We want you to comment on this. We want you to give us feedback, and we want to get it corrected and get it right. The registration criteria was posted on April 1st, and that's open for a 45-day public comment period that will close not this coming, but next Friday. And unlike standards, there's no requirement to register for a ballot body or anything else. We just entertain questions or comments right to that email that I've indicated in the next to the last bullet on this page. And of course, there's more information about this in the NERC Rules Procedure page. Next slide, Zach. So the first couple of things I'm just going to breeze through quickly. I think I probably already said this. Owner, operator, and users of the bulk power system is one criteria. We've already talked about that. The second criteria is the definition or the identification of the term that will be in the rules of procedure. Those criteria, all of these criteria are not collected in one place, but they're in the draft of the NERC rules of procedure changes, and we've collected them here. So you've got a bird's eye view of what we're really proposing. So our proposal is an entity that would be eligible for, or a candidate for this registration would be contributes to an aggregate connected load capability of greater than or equal to 20 megawatts. The point of interconnection to the bulk power system is at 60 kV. And the last criteria here is kind of a de minimis criteria, and that's 1 megawatt or greater of computational load. I've talked to several industry groups, and there are folks that will ask the question, so you've never registered large loads before. We've operated large loads, for decades without, I won't say without any problems, but we're familiar with those. Why are you doing this now? The reason is, and that's why this last criteria is identified here, is we're concerned about just the sheer magnitude of the data centers that I don't think you can pick up any news article either on the internet or hard copy without finding an article that talks about what a risk these extremely large loads, data centers, cryptocurrency, hyperscalers, all of those represent. And so the last bullet here, this last criteria, is that an entity might be have a megawatt load of 20 megawatts, have a connection of 60 kV, but it also has to have at least 1 megawatt of computational load. And that is load from servers, electrical power from server storage, networking hardware. Maybe the 1 megawatt is the right number. Maybe it's not the right number, but we're not looking to register refineries and other similar very large loads, like I said, that we're familiar with, we've worked with for literally decades. We know how they operate, and we have a good relationship with folks that are operating those facilities, so that we understand them. This data center load, computational load, is different. We don't know how it will operate, how it will ride through, how it will trip off, how quickly it'll come back, all of those kind of things. And if it's attached to the bulk power system and the size that we're seeing, either developed or under development, it has the ability to really affect the bulk power system, the entire bulk power system in a particular area. Okay, let's move on to the next one, please. I think that is the end of my spiel. Anyway, I'm glad to turn the time over to my colleague, Jamie Calderon, and she's going to talk to you about standards.
All right, thank you, Jim. All right, Zach, we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So the standards framework, for those who are new to this, the NERC world, reliability standards are reliability requirements for planning and operating the North American bulk power system. These are mandatory and enforceable based off of registered entities, those that register with us through, as Jim was speaking, the registration program. These would be people who own, operate, or use the bulk electric system in some way. So those who have, transmission operations, they plan the system, they coordinate the system, or in some cases, now we have large users that will be moving into the registration that have that. So we organize our requirements into these different sets of families and organize by different topic areas. We do that to try to keep everything in a general location. So you might have a standard that relates to multiple functional entity types. So multiple generator owners, multiple transmission planners. There might be any number of functional registrations or NERC registered entities that are required to comply with NERC standards within a single standard. And that's because we organize these by topics. So you'll see things related to modeling that will have a lot of requirements based off the full sequence of flow from modeling from the start to the finish and data exchange. That's going to be something that you'll see as we move into this process more. We care about results. We don't make money. We are a not-for-profit. The goal is not to find instances of non-compliance. Of course, Lonnie will be getting more into the compliance side, but we're here about mitigating risk. And so the development of a good standard is one that's focused on one that designates some clear performance objective or a meeting some particular risk mitigation objective. We want to make sure that we're providing some flexibility on how to do that because facts and circumstances abide, where we can ensure that there's going to be some clarity throughout the process as we develop standards is something that we take into heart. What we can include within our webinars, what we can include in supplemental documentation to make sure it's clear what's intended by a requirement and what the intended goal is that each functional entity is requested to or required to mitigate. We do have the authority to assess financial penalties for noncompliance. This can be pricey, but the goal is not to make money again. If we see a strong risk mitigation, then we're not going to be as punitive there, because the goal, of course, is to get the situation resolved. And I'll leave more to that to Lonnie's side. So we'll go to the next slide. So standards topics, again, we look at reliability coordinators, real-time operations, transmission planning. This list is not exhaustive. As we start getting into the cybersecurity space, it gets even more interesting. So what we're looking at right now, you've heard about the computational load effort. We have a project in place for this. And we're looking at a more expedited solution in the short term, a near-term solution that looks at those essential actions. So we might see a standard that's developed by this project that's focused in just this one area right now that's on this, what we're referring to as a bridge standard, that might be very hyper-focused on this particular aspect of those essential actions required for interconnection of computational load to, say, their transmission owners. The longer term view of this, we'll be looking at what is our existing framework and how computational load entities might fit within that larger structure. So there's going to be areas of this like training, emergency operations system restoration, modeling that will become more prevalent in the discussion as we get further into it over the next coming years. But so you're aware, just because there's this one standard for now, there might be a need to revise some other standards later, making sure that we're building in the entities into the existing framework where it does seem reasonable. Next slide. Our standards development process is unique to the world. It is open and transparent to all, and we heavily depend on stakeholder expertise. NERC does not write the standards. We do have a facilitation of role within this activity. We make sure that the process is moving forward. At times, we will be directed by FERC, who is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to ensure that we update or modify our standards for addressing a particular issue. And those thus will be sometimes directed. But at the same time, even within those projects, we have an industry-driven process. So all of our drafting teams are made up by stakeholders, just like yourselves. If you have the requisite experience, you are eligible to participate on a drafting team. You are eligible to participate as an observer just by simply having a phone. We value people's feedback. We want people to participate in the project, share your voice, and hammer us in the comments as well. I say that because at the time, we go through, they can seem exhaustive, but at the end of the day, when we go through such a solid back and forth formal comment review and get clarity as to what people's concerns are and making sure that we can adjust the language where appropriate, we end up with better standards. It's an exhaustive process, it's a unique process, but it is an effective process, and we want people to continue to participate where possible. So our comment periods will be open. We'll have them publicly posted on our website. If you assign or if you essentially sign up for a team, the distribution list, you'll get email updates. But of course, if you were to navigate to NERC standards on the NERC website, you'd find a lot of information as to upcoming postings, our projected schedule, and each individual project itself has its own page, which would direct you to more information, what's anticipated coming up. So you'd be able to plan and look ahead to say, where might I want to focus my time, especially if there's 20 plus projects as there are currently. Where do you want to focus? That's going to be something that's you'll have options for. So once something passes, it gets approved through this consensus process. We go through comment process and balloting process. And if we achieve 2/3 consensus to approve that, we consider that acceptable, and we take it on to our NERC board, and then take it on to FERC, and from there to the relevant provincial territories in Canada. So standards become mandatory subsequent to approval by FERC. It is important to mention that there is an implementation plan accompanying each standard. So there won't just be as soon as FERC approves it, it's effective and everything you need to comply with. With each standards project, the drafting team is not only responsible for drafting a draft standard, but also an implementation plan. And that will be part of the comment period as well, to say maybe portion of it's implemented in 2 years, maybe the remainder is portion over 3 or 4 years. It might depend on the scope of work that's required for an entity to change over to this new version of a standard, or if it's an entirely new standard, it'll just be setting that precedent. So keep on the lookout for the implementation plan as we get into that process as well. Next slide. Oh, I see a question. Restrictions on associates acting as observers? Absolutely not. So if you are interested in joining, anyone's free to just join into the calls. We do ask that we do a review of participant conduct policy. We want to make sure that we're able to keep projects moving forward. The drafting team sometimes will not really entertain questions from observers during a call, but almost always questions are absorbed and taken, sent to the developer, provided in comments through like the WebEx form or Teams format, and the team will address those comments. It's not an active participation sometimes, but sometimes observers will show up and participate in a project in a way that is incredibly helpful. Whether or not they're able to participate as drafting team members, some have been very helpful in supporting the team, even being assigned work in some occasions when they feel like they are able to participate in that way. So please, no hesitation to join a drafting team call and just to check it out to see. You don't have to subscribe to anything. All of the information for the WebEx and meeting invites will be publicly posted. Our process is currently governed by our process manual, which is in our rules of procedure. As Jim noted, there's a process for modifying our rules. We are currently in the midst of a modification to our process. So we have a modernization of standards, processes, and procedures work, which is the MSPP. They are currently in the action plan of developing out the recommendations that the board approved in February of this year, which will overhaul our process. So while we have right now our standards committee with its subcommittee structures noted here and a particular standards process, we're going to be moving in over the next year to two into a new process. So there's going to be a different committee structure, a different way to engage, but what's not changing is the opening transparency of the process itself. The things that we commit to in the organization to ensure everyone has line of sight and the ability to participate in some way on these projects is not going to change. So this is somewhat procedural. There'll be some revisions. We'll keep everyone informed. If you're interested in the details, let me know and we'll provide more information as we're getting through. There's an initiative page on NERC.com that's focused on this, and you can find more information there if you were to go to NERC's webpage, initiatives, and look at the MSPP effort. Next page. High level process here. We go through a standards initiation right now that's called a SAR, which is a way to start the project, list the objectives. We get nominations for drafting team members, observers can join. We might have some technical conferences, and then we go through as many comment and ballots as necessary until we meet approval. At that point, we take it forward to implementation, take it off to the board and FERC, and then of course, through the details of the implementation plan, and then we move on to the next project. And hand it over to compliance to look at and to continue to implement. Next slide. The SAR, again, will outline the scope, essentially what the reliability benefit is, what we're trying to accomplish by a particular project. It goes through its own stakeholder feedback process. So we'll post an initiation request, currently called the SAR, and then for all of industry will comment on that. So when a drafting team is first looking at this project, the current process is for them to review the comments received back on the SAR itself. We're currently in that phase with the computational load entities. That was posted, and we're going to be looking through those comments as over the next couple weeks before we start working on the project itself. Next slide. NERC's roles and standards developed. So I mentioned that we developed, facilitate the process. The drafting team develops the specifics. We want to say who, what, when, but we don't get into how. Entity facts and circumstances should be considered. We want some flexibility in how people meet. There's different structures, different organizational structures. Some are in vertically integrated utilities, some operate in markets. We need to make sure that we're moving forward with standards that will work for everyone. Occasionally, we will have a regional variant. That means our regional entities who we work with, the 6 regional entity counterparts that represent the larger ERO enterprise, NERC being the Electric Reliability Organization, and the enterprise being that fuller body with our regional entities. Next slide. The drafting team formation is not just the only thing. We have a developer who supports the team. Of course, there's going to be on high priority projects, we have a new role referred to as an analyst. We have compliance experts that follow from the compliance team, subject matter experts who join and participate from the engineering team, our reliability assessments team on occasion, dedicated legal staff, FERC observers, and industry observers. So on any given call, we might see several dozen people helping this project move forward, especially on a high priority project. There'll be more interest, and we're going to see continued growth in this one, I'm sure. Next slide. Drafting team members and observers. Drafting team members go through a nomination and they get appointed by the standards committee, and they have various roles and responsibilities. I see a little bit more on the question that came in through chat on rejection for registration, and I want to get into maybe that example a little bit more. I'm curious, as an observer, you're able to just join calls because the information is public. So I'm wondering, we might have to talk about that one, what that rejection was. But if we can move to the next slide. The drafting team roles and responsibility, we facilitate the process, but we work with the chair and vice chair, making sure that we're moving through the process and providing information to the public as we're required to and as best we're able. Making sure that we're not only adhering to the process, but making the best decisions when we're coming to develop the project, what's going to be an effective requirement. But when we're looking at different drafting team members, they're required to fit a particular set of expertise. We'll go through an interview process, making sure that they're going to be able to best support that project. Observers are not requested to disrupt the team or the development process, but they are requested to join and help the team where they are able. Next slide. Validating comment, we have a formal process for that. I know we're coming up on time here, so I want to move a little bit quicker. Just that we have a set period that we comment. We're going to include each comment period dates on each posting. So as those are upcoming, we'll include the start date and the close date, so there won't be any surprises. It's just a very clear update on the calendar, and we'll be responding to each comment individually. So if you provided a comment, you participated through our registered ballot body and were able to get access to the standards balloting system. The registered ballot body is the group that allows you access to be able to comment and vote on standards, and the SBS is the tool, that standards balloting system that they would use for each project. So we can provide more detail on that. That's a little bit more than we need for this call. But next slide. And lastly, we're dedicated to doing more outreach. In addition to the new website, we're trying to host more technical workshops. We're doing these new quarterly video updates and webinars, making sure that we're providing summary documents and doing direct outreach. It's very important for us to make sure we understand the context more as we're getting into the details. So I went through a lot here very quickly. I took a little bit extra time, so Vinona, I'll hand it over to you here on the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. This was for me, or was this your slide?
Oh, this was for you, Jamie.
I left this one. Okay, my mistake. So computational load, new and updated standards are required to close this gap, as Jim mentioned. We do have our timeline here coming up. So you see we're in this period right here after the deadline to join the advisory group. We're at 100 people right now. So we've initiated this project. The SAR outlines the scope. The team is currently reviewing those comments, and the short-term advisory group actually just had their first meeting yesterday, where we had a 2-hour meeting doing a very detailed 101 across all of NERC structure and making sure that folks were able to start engaging with us on this project. So the timeline's on the right, and with that, we'll go ahead and move to the next slide.
So we can turn it over to Vinona now to give
Excellent.
some perspectives from her experiences working on the standards drafting teams.
Great. Thank you, Zach. Great lead in, Jamie. Yeah, all of the things that Jamie said are very true. In all of my tenure out here in the NERC space, I participated on many drafting team, many projects, both as an official drafting team member, but also as an observer. And Jamie's absolutely correct. Preference or deference is given to drafting team members. A lot of the discussion and all of the activities around voting and pulling the comments together lie with the drafting team members. But observers many times bring very valid points to the conversation. And so I'm here to encourage you, if you ever feel like there's a project out there that could have an impact to your entity, get engaged in one way or the other. And if you cannot find the time to be an official member of a drafting team, be an observer. You can go to the NERC website, go under standards, look at the reliability standards development or under development, and all of the projects are there. You can get all the information related to the project that you're interested in. You can go to the events page. You can see all of the meetings that are coming up. Every drafting team meeting is out there. That way you'll always be informed. You can get tapped in and be an official member of the distribution list for the project, so that you get all the relevant information. Usually includes meeting invites so that you can participate. I've had a lot of very positive experiences. It has increased my engagement at the NERC level because, as Jamie said, there are many NERC representatives in various capacities participating on every project. And so it allows you the opportunity to engage with NERC on various levels. And some of the statements that she made, one, she talked about getting the standard right. If we as the SMEs and as the industry experts, the stakeholders that are driving the process, if we don't voice our concerns in that process, then they're not going to be addressed. And she talked about, taking into consideration entity facts and circumstances. If we don't tell them what our facts and circumstances are, they can't address them. So it's really important to participate at least on a small scale and provide that voice. When you look at us as the users of the bulk power system and as the NERC stratosphere is evolving to, include us a little bit more, it's even more important than ever. So I would just encourage that. And I will also just say I'm always available to anyone if they have questions, if I can provide some guidance. I'm happy to help.
Thank you so
Great,
much,
thank you.
Winona.
I think we're ready to turn it over to Lonnie. Let's talk compliance, Lonnie.
Hey, I see that y'all saved the best part for last, so I
We
really
did.
appreciate it. What's interesting is it's a lot of intention too, right? Because if you really think about it, with Jim's group, we look at the registration piece. That's the first part that people see, and then with the standards piece, the standards come into play. Compliance don't come into play until the registration's done, and we have standards in play. So it kind of feeds into each other. So this is a really good opportunity to discuss it in sequence of saying, okay, the registration piece is there. The standards may have already been there for some people, but as we're looking at computational loads with new standards coming into play, the compliance piece is really tagging on along. We're paying attention. Jamie, mentioned observers. Compliance observes many of those meetings. We provide input when we're asked, and we look for enforceability, auditability, and making sure that the security bar is being honored. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start off, and like I said, this is going to be quick around compliance. We only got limited time, so I'm not going to talk about everything. But if anybody ever wants to understand more, just reach out to me. I'll set some time up. We can talk about anything you want to talk about in the compliance realm. The first slide, we want to talk about the CMAP. So many people look at that and say, well, what's the CMAP? It's just another term for the rules of procedure, right? So as Jim mentioned early on about registration, there's one registration program across the Euro Enterprise. There's one compliance program really across the Euro Enterprise. There's one CMAP, and the regional entities implement that CMAP, and we oversee through regional delegation agreements that they're implementing it in an effective manner. So as you can see from the slide, it's the regulatory teeth. If you want to go out and look at it, Appendix 4C, there's a lot of great information. It outlines the guardrails of where we may ask stuff. If you look at Section 1500, it's going to talk about the data confidentiality, the retention, what we may request, any information like that. One thing I will note here is, in compliance, many people look at compliance as a check the box type of activity. And we're really moving away from that. So what you may see as computational loads come on, we're going to ask the questions of what risk do you pose to the bulk power system? We've got standards and standards that give us the hook. You're registered, you got the standards in place, but we're also going to just say, okay, what risk do you pose? And that may determine on how often you get monitored with the different tools. And we'll get to the tools on the next slide. Go ahead. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So compliance monitoring tools. There's 7 compliance monitoring tools. Many of these people look at it and say, well, are they really compliance monitoring? If it's a self-report, how's that compliance monitoring? It's just a tool that gets accomplished, right? The objective of making sure that the power grid is reliable, it's secure. So when you look across the tools, you'll see like self-reports. Over 80% of all possible non-compliance come in through self-reports. Our industry is very good at identifying and making a determination whether they violated the standards or not, and then self-reporting it and mitigating it. And then validation comes through the regions through either enforcement through mitigation reviews, or even the auditors could look at the mitigation when they come on site, right? The one thing I want to highlight on this slide as well is the periodic data submittals. A lot of our entities are very familiar with those. Those may be event driven, like vegetation management. So if something touches the wire, it's in the right of way, there's event reporting that's periodic that's required. Some of the other ones you'll see like complaints. That's a monitoring thing. We get complaints in, not all the time. I think we got several that we're working through now, but all that it stays anonymous. We use ethics point. So if you ever see issues across the grid and you're like, man, something should be done about this, we've got a complaint hotline that you can call. We don't even know who's calling. So you'll see investigations. We do investigations that could be around some large events across the grid when we think that there's a significant risk that we really need to address. So on the compliance monitoring methods, one of the key points is these are all delegated down to the regions, right? Many people associate all this with NERC. NERC, typically, we don't do many compliance audits. In fact, I've been here 8 or 9 years. I don't recall us doing any audits for the last 7 or so, 8. We do some spot checks when we get complaints in, but primarily it's the regional entities that would be performing all these activities. So it's very important to work with the regional entities that you're registered in and build that trust and that network with them to understand some of the compliance monitoring methods. Next slide. So as we talked about the standards, as Jamie did a great job of talking about the standards and with registration, we also have guidance that we provide. So many times people look at the standard and say, I don't know what to do, or hey, does this make sense? So there's 2 types of guidance out there. There's implementation guidance, which industry writes it, and it's one way to comply with the standard. And what happens is we got pre-qualified organizations. It's out on our public website. And these organizations can submit guidance, and we look at it across the ERO enterprise and say, yep, that's one way to comply. And if an entity follows the guidance, then they would get deference. If the auditors come in and say, oh, we found something, but you followed the guidance, you would get deference and possibly not an audit finding, right? The other guidance document is practice guides. And this is what people are more familiar with because I think we got more of those. And this is written by the ERO enterprise. NERC and the regions will write this. And many times it's the audit approach. So the standards there, it's our interpretation. We work with standards team, we work with legal, and we're like, okay, here's the things that we may ask during engagement. And not all the questions may apply to that entity because there's fact and circumstances, right? You'll hear that a lot of times as you get familiar with NERC and how we operate. The facts and circumstances around that registered entity really drive a lot of direction on the compliance monitoring side. So many people say, well, the region didn't look at this practice guide, and we were like, well, maybe it didn't apply to your situation. So it's really getting away from that check the box and more to, hey, we got guidance. There's a lot of flexibility in how to comply with these standards. So use the tools that you have to try to get there. Next slide. In addition to our guidance, we've got a lot of outreach, right? If you haven't subscribed to our weekly standards compliance and enforcement bulletin, there's a lot of great information there, like when we're going to have small group advisory sessions. Those are one-on-one sessions and big webinar to where we talk about your entity and we talk about prior to the effective date of the standard saying, okay, how are y'all going to implement this? What's y'all's goal in implementing this? And we actually do what many refer to as the old compliance readiness, to where we come in and look at your documentation and say, here's some things to think about. That's what these small group advisory sessions are. That's why we do them before the effective date. We set it up with your region, and other regions are invited to attend. NERC's there, and we just talk about whatever questions you have about implementing reliability standards. And with computational load, we'll probably set some of those up just like we have with IBRs. We've set 2 or 3 up with IBRs around PRC standards and cold weather standards. But you'll see we have currently compliant podcasts. So those are just quick 15, 20-minute podcasts where we speak about a lot of questions that we may be receiving. We get a lot of questions around multiple region registered entities and coordinated oversight, or we get questions just around how to use some of the tools we have around our tools align and secure evidence locker. So we try to get communication out there through multiple ways, through regional workshops. We'll have webinars, but there's many ways to stay engaged with NERC and understand where compliance may be thinking, where we may be driving home. Next slide, please. So the oversight objectives from NERC, right? And this is where it really ties in with the regional entities is we validate how effective they are with their delegated CMAP and ORCP tasks. When I talk about ORCP, that's the registration certification. Jim has registration, I have certification. Certification is required for the big three, the balancing authorities, transmission operators, and the reliability coordinators. So their control centers have to be certified. So we have a program around some of that. I don't think that will apply to the CLEs, but it's something to be aware of as you start working with your GOPs, or not GOPs, the TOPs or BAs and RCs, just for awareness. So one of the key things that you'll get from this slide is transparency and clear direction. We perform oversight of all the regions, and we look for the harmonization. And harmonization doesn't necessarily mean that every region does the same task the same way. It means that they had their processes and we get to a similar spot in the end. And that's something that some people struggle with is they're like, well, WEC may ask this question, but MRO asked this question. And we're like, they're trying to get to the same objective. It's just a different way to look at the risk. So just always want to throw that in there about the harmonization doesn't mean everybody does it the same way. And next slide. The key takeaways, and that's why I put a key takeaway slide in here, because I knew that the time was limited, is there's many different tools how we can monitor. It all comes down to the standards that are in play, the risk that the entity poses to the bulk power system. That will determine a lot maybe on your compliance monitoring engagement. And, as we talk about some of those tools like self-certification, if you're really low risk to the bulk power system, you'll probably get more self-certifications where you attest that you're compliant, and they may ask for some type of evidence to back it up. But from what we've heard, it's a lot better than having a full-blown audit, right? And dedicated week on site and all this other stuff. We've got a lot of compliance guidance available. The tools are out there. NERC website, we've restructured that. It's a great resource. We have targeted outreach, like this event. We also will have the target outreach with small group advisory sessions. As this moves along, I'll be working with Jim to understand who he's working with around these large computational loads and figuring out, okay, can we just email that group and say, hey, come to a webinar and it's only these type of people, or groups or organizations that's in this. So it's very targeted for you. So you don't feel out of place asking questions. So we do that target type of outreach. And then the last two are really around the harmonization and how we work with the regions and making sure that the regions are effective in the oversight through the regional delegation agreements. That's a lot of information. I didn't touch much on enforcement. Jamie brought up about the financial penalties. It's a civil penalty. I know that in compliance, we assess risk and we assess compliance. I'll let enforcement figure out what the penalty is. We don't want to be in the middle of that. They ask us risk statements and we give it to them. So next slide. And that's all I had. I know it's kind of quick for compliance, but like I said, if there's ever any questions, you can either go through Zach or just reach out to me directly. I'll be more than happy to have conversations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all of our speakers, Zach, as always, for helping us and put together this great series, and to our individual speakers, Jim and Jamie and Lonnie, and for Vanona's perspectives. Again, if you have questions, please feel free. We have about 5 minutes if you want to raise your hand or if you want to put it in the chat. Will we receive a copy of this presentation? I do believe, Zach, that you'll make this available and I can send it out to all attendees in addition to the recording. Is that correct? Correct. All right, excellent. So as people are maybe taking the time to put their questions together, we do have one question from the chat. If you fall below the tentative 1 megawatt threshold, are there any rules for those large loads that are being, let's say we scroll down, that are being evaluated as part of this current project. So again, we're talking about the de minimis threshold and how some of these, we're starting to comment on these thresholds. So just, as we're starting to look at this, this 1 megawatt of computational load as a de minimis, I know that this is still in the proposal phase, because I think that there is a concern with the threshold that this may be, too low. So the question again is, is there any other sort of requirements that may be smaller, that fall below some of this de minimis, megawatt threshold, where, even though we're looking at computational loads, could that implicate some that maybe don't have the same impacts on the system, that have a lower impact? So Jim, I see your hand up if you want to start taking this question.
In short, no. In short, no. If an entity right now, let's say the criteria as it's stated is adopted, FERC approves it. If an entity falls below that 1 megawatt de minimis requirement, it would not be registered. There wouldn't be any more obligation than there is now for an entity. So I think there's a lot of concern about how we calculate that. There's a lot of concern about whether 1 megawatt ought to be 20 megawatts or 5 megawatts or 10. But no, if an entity doesn't meet each one of those 3 requirements, they would not be a candidate for registration. And so the rest of the program about standards and compliance would not apply to them.
Okay. And if there is some plans to then expand in the future, and that entity could maybe take on additional load, or maybe even additional computational load, would that additional capacity then potentially expose customers to future registration if they do increase to meet some of and they do exceed some of these thresholds? Would that then trigger some future?
We see this regularly, and it's just out there in the future. So an entity develops a wind farm. It doesn't meet the criteria for registration. There's not enough capacity, 5 megawatts, 10 megawatts. They're not a candidate for registration. If they, on the other hand, continue to add windmills or batteries or whatever and meet that minimum threshold, then they're a candidate for registration. But until they meet all 3 of those criteria, and again, they're draft, I don't know that they will be the ones that are approved, but until they meet the approved criteria, they would not be registered. And we're not envisioning, what might happen in the future. Right now, our big concern is the big data centers that I think I mentioned earlier. It's in the news all the time. It presents a pretty significant risk.
Right. No, thank you, Jim. And I will just say to the attendees on the call that, when we're talking about trade associations, and I know this has been such a huge amount of information kind of hitting users all at once, because it's not typically an arena that we have had to play in much. NERC has done tremendous outreach to the various trade associations. And so I would really encourage individual companies on the phone, connect with your trade association, rely on your trade association to help you navigate how to engage with NERC. NERC puts on quarterly trade association meetings. They keep us very, very well apprised and updated on their activities. And so, ELCON is very, very engaged with this, as is ECA. We are here to answer questions and help people navigate, because I know this is a lot of information, and this isn't just a one and done. We're just doing a webinar and go on off into the great blue yonder and figure out NERC. We're here to walk you through the process and continue this engagement. And NERC has been tremendous in making themselves available to trade associations. So really, really connect with your trade associations. We're all going to be commenting on these on the proposals on CLE, and I know that drafts will start to come across your desk in the next couple of weeks. So we really encourage you to take a look at that and provide your feedback to us so we can get it to NERC. As we wrap up today, we have two more in our series. The next one will look at reliability assessments, which is hugely important coming up. This is something where NERC takes a look at the general health of the reliability of our system and reports out on some of the areas where they see some risk. And then in the fourth quarter, we're going to take a deeper dive into the committee structure and the board of trustees. And again, this is all kind of changing because we are doing the MSPP process currently. So things are evolving as we speak, but really encourage you to engage in the next couple of webinars to really learn about NERC. And again, we're always here to help you navigate and understand NERC better as we look at this emerging issue, and it's all coming at us quickly. So thanks again for your attendance, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next one. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.